Are you searching for the perfect love? You can't purchase it, you perfect love. Don't be searching for the perfect love unless the lane you searching for someone inside yourself.
Peace, y'all. Welcome to the Women in Hip Hop Wednesdays podcast, a very happy, very Black, very intersectional Black feminist, happy Black History Month to you, beloved. I'm your host, your music midwife and nerdy hip hop homegirl, Coco Peila. I'm a multi-hyphenate hip hop artist, singer, songwriter, record producer, songwriting coach, and MC, which is what qualifies me to take you on this journey. This week's episode is called We Are All Survivors. And you might be asking, okay, Coco, what are you talking about? Well, as y'all know, a couple weeks back, we did an episode called Breaking Down Perfect Love. Perfect Love is the first song off of my next studio album, Confessions of a Black Feminist Rapper Part 2, Trigger Warning, which is literally a Black feminist hip hop album addressing survivorhood, addressing childhood trauma, intergenerational trauma in my own childhood, and how to heal from it. It's an album made by a survivor for survivors as a blueprint for how we heal and how we reconnect to our purpose and, complete the assignment while we're here on earth. Towards the end of last year, 2025, we had the trials that happened with Sean Diddy Combs, and we had the Epstein files. And I know for me as a survivor, it was so jarring for my nervous system to wake up and open up social media or open up Google and see articles and memes and think pieces constantly about sexual assault, sexual violence, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, human trafficking, sex trafficking. When you live with that type of abuse under your roof, in your home, in your relationships, especially as a young child, absolutely it puts you in this fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, in survival mode, and your brain shuts down and you just back in your amygdala, just trying to get by, just trying to make it happen. And of course, all that adrenaline and that cortisol pumping all the time just can just ravage your nervous system. So for a lot of survivors, I know that whenever we have a lot of the violence and the exploitation and mistreatment that often gets targeted at women and girls, when we have it come to the surface, it's not like we don't know about it because we survived it, but it still can bring up trauma or, reopen wounds. But it's been interesting for me hosting Women in Hip Hop Wednesdays, the Women in Hip Hop Wednesdays podcast, because I am coming to understand that part of the responsibility that comes with this podcast. It's not just so that I can sit here and talk and floss about, my dope lyrics or, my abilities as a recording artist or a record producer, or even, read a book and tell you all the cool facts that I know about hip hop history or women in hip hop. But there's a responsibility that comes with the platform. And one of the things that I noticed as I've been reading and learning about women in hip hop is that so many women experience some form of violence, the threat of violence, sexual violence, and just this is the truth, is that Black girls are so unprotected. And so we have to always we get to be outraged about that fact, but we also get to ask ourselves, like, why, you know? And I remember when I was 14 and I was a freshman in high school. I had just moved from Sacramento with two of my older sisters and my niece, and we moved in with another older sister in Berkeley, California. And we were all living in this one room. Our sister had a 2-bedroom apartment, and the 4 of us was living in one of the rooms. And she was like, y'all don't have to go, y'all don't have to move to Michigan. There's too many white people out there. Like, y'all can stay here in the Bay Area and just move into my room, right? And so I ended up enrolling to Berkeley High, and that's how I ended up in the Bay Area when I was 14. I have family out there. I visited when I was younger several times in Richmond, Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley. But that's how I ended up in Berkeley. And I remember my freshman year of high school, it was '01. And so I believe it was '01, and in the fall. And I remember that was the year that the quote unquote sex tape, R. Kelly's sex tape, leaked. Meanwhile, at that time, nobody was saying, at least in the circles that I was in the classrooms or the chat boards and all the places where this was being talked about, no one was talking about it as child pornography, as child abuse, as sexual abuse, as child sexual abuse, as sexual violence. None of these words were being used. And so nobody was describing this quote unquote sex tape as what it truly was, right? And I myself was around the same age as the young Black girl who was in the video. And it's not until, now I'm 38, going on 39, now as a grown-ass woman, coming into my grown-ass womanness, okay, I still got some things to get together, but I am grown. I can look back and really see and feel how young I was. I was the oldest I had ever been, and I had already been through a lot of things. People often describe me as an old soul, as wise beyond my years. But when I look back, I'm like, I was just 14, and no one was explaining to me or other Black girls, this thing that they're talking about, this is sexual abuse. This is child abuse. This is child sexual abuse. This is sexual assault. This is inappropriate, right? The conversation that was being had around it was, and this is what I remember specifically being in a classroom. It was like Spanish class or something at Berkeley High. And the teacher, who was an older white man, maybe there was a comment said, I don't remember how the conversation begun, but he decided to open up the class and have an open dialogue. And this is, girls and boys, and he decided to have an open dialogue about it. And I'm sure probably people was cracking jokes and saying different things. But imagine being a 14-year-old girl in a room, and mostly what's happening is the biggest part of the conversation was a debate about whether or not the girl in the video who was being abused looked like a girl. That was the conversation point. Well, did she look like she was grown enough? And most people, I didn't know she was that young. She looked grown to me. She was developed. She was this, she was that. There was no empathy. There was no compassion. There was no concern. And again, it was being referred to as a sex tape, a sex tape, a sex tape. Well, to me, a sex tape is pornography between two consenting adults. Whether or not you subscribe to watching it or not, to me, if one party is underage and does not have the ability or the systemic power to consent, it's not a sex tape, right? And so just even the way that we looked at it, I felt like was very racialized because she was a Black girl. And I wouldn't want that to happen to anyone who it's ever happened to or anyone in the future. But I also know that it would be a very different story if she was a young a young white girl of the same age. And just all the implications that came along with that, unspoken, and even before I had a certain analysis about systemic oppression, about sexism and male domination, about anti-Black racism, about the institution of slavery and how that's impacted and traumatized all of us, that there's so much that gets set in that we know as young Black girls, we know that we're not protected. And we know that our dignity is on the line. And we know that how we behave can become the justification for being mistreated and taken advantage of. And that instead of compassion and empathy and protection, oftentimes we get blame, shame, scapegoating, you know what I'm saying? And being excluded and exiled, from our communities instead of getting resourced and getting support to heal. So I've been just chewing on all these different things. Initially I didn't want to watch the Diddy documentary. And then as I was, seeing on threads, different Black folks talk about different things that they learned or that were alleged in the documentary, I was like, wow, okay, maybe I need to watch this, from a journalistic standpoint. But it was really triggering. And I do remember telling my partner, maybe the day after a while, I was like, I watched the whole documentary. I was crying in the kitchen, can I have a hug? Because it was super triggering. I wanted to kind of bring forth this idea to us because oftentimes hip hop gets scapegoated for being over sexual, hypersexual, violent, disrespectful. But I, as we've talked about, hip hop is both a mirror. It's the reflection. It's the call and the response, right? There's nothing in hip hop that doesn't exist outside of hip hop in the world, and nothing in hip hop that besides hip hop culture itself and the innovations that have happened within the culture, all the things that hip hop gets scapegoated for, sexism, violence, hypersexuality, these are things that existed long before. And so I want us to think about all of ourselves as survivors, because even people who perpetrate sexual violence and violence of any kind and mistreatment of any kind are people who have survived violence. I'm going to read some stats, some facts and statistics from the UN, from unwomen.org. They have a fact report that I was reading through the other day. Because I know a lot from my own lived experience as a Black woman who was once a Black girl, who has Black sisters and aunties and mamas and cousins and friends and coworkers and so on, collaborators. The stories, the stories and the shared realities that we have experienced and been through gives me enough information to know what time it is. Each person, no matter what your identity is or your group of identities, you learn through lived experience and through the wisdom and experience of other people around you, what the landscape that your distinct identity or set of identities is that you're navigating, and you learn how to move accordingly, right? So that's why it's so important for us to trust survivors when they say something, and trust Black women when we speak up about something, right? One of my dear mentors always says that Black people have been the social conscious conscience of the United States since the beginning. You know, the canary in the mine. You know, the folks who are like, something ain't right, right? And so we need to like trust the folks who are basically on the front lines, being the most impacted by these things. And you know, wherever there is oppression, there is intergenerational trauma. And wherever there is intergenerational trauma, there is mistreatment, right? Like wherever there's intergenerational trauma, somewhere along the line, someone is getting mistreated, someone is getting neglected, someone is getting abused. And it's not always a parent doing it to a child, but sometimes a parent might, because of systemic oppression, a parent might not have access to labor that properly pays them. So now they have to pick up 3 jobs. And so now they're not at home. And now they have to leave their child at a place, you know, daycare or a friend's house or a family member's house who might have survived their own trauma and be reenacting it on the child. Part of why I'm saying this is because we tend to, I always say, like, clutch our pearls. We tend to clutch our pearls. I can't believe that R. Kelly did that. I can't believe that Diddy did that. We're going through a whole trial to discuss whether or not someone is guilty. I'm not surprised. Why am I not surprised? I'm a survivor. I've seen people do things. I've experienced things from people who are supposed to be safe, who are held up within a community as being the dignified, you know, respectable, honored, you know, leader or person that's in power. Behind closed doors, act out their own trauma on those who have less power. And so we have to start asking ourselves again, like I said earlier, why? And it makes me think about, you know, these ancient systems of oppression that have been around for thousands of years. It makes me think about empire and classism. It makes me think about violence and the threat of violence, and sexual violence, how these are all tools of oppression. These are tools that are used to dominate people and groups of people, right? Because if I was just to roll up to your block and tell you, yo, you got to move off this block. This is my block now. You looking at me like, who are you? Right? We don't know you. You from Berkeley? Like, we ain't worried about you. But now if I pull out a weapon or I whistle and a bunch of people come around the corner with, you know, weapons ready to kill and harm, now it's a problem. Now it's a war, right? And so violence and the threat of violence has been used to dominate and enforce dominance and to take over, you know, land, people, resources. And that's something that, regardless of if you grew up in a 2-parent home and your parents were really present and they never harmed you and they loved you and they encouraged you and they gave you everything you needed and you never had your lights turned off and you never went without and you always had an auntie, uncle, grandma, cousin, somebody telling you that they loved you and they believed in you and they sat down next to you every night and helped you with your homework, and anytime you were scared or upset or you went through anything, they listened to you deeply and then they encouraged you. They connected you with the resources that you needed. They paid attention to you when there was something. They came to your graduation or your show or your concert, or, you know, even if you had every single thing in the world that's supposed to set someone up to become a well-adjusted, healthy adult, our people still survived so many unspeakable horrors. And I'm talking about globally, and I'm talking about zooming out to thousands and thousands of years. What's up, y'all? I just wanted to make sure to invite you to collect the print. As you know, we have a limited edition 12 by 12 high quality print. And this is a collaboration with an amazing Black female artist named China Brown, who designed this. You can frame it, you can put it up in your office, you can put it up in your home, you can gift it to somebody, On the back is a wonderful QR code that you can scan, and it downloads the Love Me All acoustic, which is not going to be on my studio album. It's not on any of the streaming platforms. It's like a special, very limited release. And just for the month of February, I'm actually going to include a QR code so that you can also download Perfect Love, which up until now has only been available with the capsule pre-orders. So just for the month of February, y'all gonna get 2 songs with this. If you wanna know more about it, you wanna order a pack with all the dope ass colors, or you just wanna get a single, you can go to cocopeila.com/theprint. This is for every Black woman that gave the culture everything and got crumbs in return. We are investing in building a different system that really honors our art, our songs, our visual art, our contributions, our analysis as fine art. And I'm so excited to have y'all. So go snatch this shit up before it goes, because it's not gonna be here for long. And yeah, thank you. Women as a class of people have been experiencing and enduring the unspeakable for thousands of years. Black folks have been enduring the unspeakable for hundreds of years. And we're talking about colonization on the continent of Africa. And we're talking about those of us throughout the diaspora who were removed and trafficked. Like, we have to think about it from a zoomed out lens. How does this impact groups of people over time? What's the implication? I think about the occupation of Palestine. I think about the Congo. I think about Sudan. I think about the ongoing occupation of, the Americas, of Turtle Island. I think about what's the impact on people? Because we know that hurt people. And I know, because I've been working with young people for many years, right? After school, classroom teacher, music teacher, teaching artist, songwriting, rapping, performance, singing workshops, nanny. I have nannied over 150 children. This is facts. Big shout out to, I'm not going to say the nannying agency, but, there are many children in the Bay Area who have had Coco as a nanny, I've taken care of newborn children. I come from a large family. I'm one of 6. I'm the oldest girl of 6 on my mom's side and the middle youngest of 12 on my dad's side. I've been around a lot of children, and something I can tell you is that babies don't come out evil. I have not met one evil baby. I have not met one racist baby. I have not met one sexist baby. I have not met one stuck-up, snooty classes baby. I have never met one owning class baby, fascist baby, authoritarian baby. Like, I don't think that Donald Trump was born like that. I think that Donald Trump was born a blameless angel. I know some of y'all gonna fight with me like, he the devil incarnate. But he was a good, pure, loving baby. And something happened to that baby that he would become who he is, and also that he would be so lost that he would become this puppet that's being dominated by owning class men who we don't even know and we don't even see, and their agendas. And we have to understand that even those who appear to be in power, the owning class, let me tell you something. Human beings, we were born to be together. We are naturally cooperative, loving, compassionate. Things are better together. If I got a delicious sandwich and I'm kicking it with my best friend, I'm like, you want to try it, mama? It's going to bring me joy to share, to break off what I have and share it with you. This is how we are naturally. And this is what I'm telling you. Anybody who's ever spent any time with small children, before they go through all the indoctrination and the conditioning, This is how human beings are naturally. We are loving. We are cooperative. We root for each other. We share. We stand up against injustice, okay? So what then happens to us? What has happened to us? Well, we have survived things. Our parents, our grandparents have survived things, right? And unfortunately, like I said, sexual assault, sexual violence, sex trafficking, sexual abuse, these are things that have happened on mass scales to our people. When we look back at different, attempted genocides that's happened to different groups of people. And I'm talking about even the European people. I got some Welsh people in my line on my mama's side. Like, the English was running all about Europe, just absolutely like threatening people and waging wars on folks. What I'm saying is that we have to heal. Something that happened thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago to your great, 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 if they didn't get a chance to heal from it, they passed it down. And the thing is that in a family system, there are different roles. Somebody might be alcoholic. Somebody might be doing street drugs. Somebody might be physically abusing the people who have less power around them. Somebody might be the workaholic. Somebody might be the one that's like the overachiever that swoops in to save. No matter how the dysfunction shows up in you, it's kind of like that law of the universe that like energy can neither be created nor, you know what I'm talking about? Energy can neither be created nor, y'all know it. Somebody watching the podcast right now screaming at the screen like, but basically like when something harmful happens, it doesn't go away. It doesn't matter how deep somebody tried to bury it or repress it, it's gonna come out. And it's gonna come out in our bodies, it's gonna come out in our actions, it's gonna come out in our beliefs or in our blind spots. And so we have to heal from it. And so when I was watching the Diddy documentary, and even back in the day, thinking through the ways that R. Kelly acted out his pain and his trauma, I think about on a grand scale, what happened to our people. I think about Black people. First of all, I think about why is it that we adultify Black girls and we have this like lack of compassion and care. Why are Black girls often used as pawns and sexually exploited? And then you find out more about the stories and you're like, wow, she was unprotected by her family or whatever the case may be. Part of what I want us to think about is that it happens because some of these heinous crimes have been so normalized within our cultures, and because people are walking around traumatized, and when you're traumatized, you become numb to things, or you reenact it, sometimes unawarely. And so I also think about our people and what they went through when they were being trafficked from the continent of Africa, what they went through on the slave ships, what they went through when those who survived the slave ships and survived the ocean and then got here and had to be up on auction blocks, the ways that our bodies were, there were people who intentionally trafficked us with the idea that they needed more unpaid laborers in order for their profit margin. And therefore they needed Black women and girls to reproduce more unpaid laborers. And therefore, like all these things that had to do with hypersexualizing our bodies and the atrocities, the unspeakable things that happened to us that we had to witness and still go back to work the next day. And so I'm just thinking about the ways that then gets passed down. This is not to make excuses for anyone who has harmed others, for perpetrators of abuse and violence. But it's more so. But it's more so. But it's more so for us to start thinking about and realizing, like, what then do we need to do to stop this from happening? And I think it's both. We need to do the healing work on what happened to us, what happened to our people. And I think it's also, we need to start becoming more aware of what happened and what has become normal to us. Facts and figures ending violence against women. This is the 19th of November, 2025, from unwomen.org. Prevalence of violence against women and girls. Global scale of violence against women, an estimated 840 million women, an estimated 840 million women, almost 1 in 3, have been subjected to physical and or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both, at least once in their life. 30% of women aged 15 and older. This figure, which does not include sexual harassment, has remained largely unchanged in the last 2 decades. Women who have experienced violence are more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety disorders, unplanned pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, and HIV, with long-lasting consequences. Sexual violence by someone other than the partner is widespread but highly underreported. Globally, 8%, or 263 million women 15 years and older report experiencing sexual violence from someone other than a partner at least once in their lifetime. While violence affects women everywhere, there are disparities across regions and countries. Women in countries classified as lowest income, conflict affected, or climate vulnerable settings are disproportionately affected. For example, regions of Oceania, excluding Australia and New Zealand, UN SDG classified least developed countries, LDCs, and small island developing states have estimated 38%, 18%, and 17% prevalence of the past 12 months intimate partner violence, respectively, which is higher than the global average of 11%. Femicides. In 2024, around 50,000 women and girls worldwide were killed by their intimate partners or family members. Lower than the 2023 estimate, this change is not indicative of an actual decrease, as it is largely due to the differences in data available at the country level. In 2024, the 2024 figure means that 60% of the almost 83,300 women and girls killed intentionally during the year were murdered by their intimate partners or other family members. In other words, an average of 137 women and girls worldwide lost their lives every day at the hands of their partner or a close relative. Women who suffer multiple forms of discrimination face a higher risk of violence and are more vulnerable to its consequences. Violence against women starts early and risks persist throughout life. Adolescent girls are more at risk of intimate partner violence than adult women. In the past year only, almost 1 in 6 adolescent girls aged 15 to 19 years old, 16%, who have been in a relationship have already been physically or sexually abused by a partner. Still, in the past year, between 4 and 5% of women aged 60 and older have experienced intimate partner violence. The true figure, however, may be higher, as this does not capture additional types of violence older women may face, such as withholding of medication or assistive devices, or financial abuse and neglect. Gender inequality and misogyny directly contribute to partner violence. A regional analysis of women's health surveys conducted in 5 CARICOM member states, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago, from 2016 to 2019 found that ever partnered women 15 to 64 who were in relationships with men who had beliefs that reinforced male dominance and gender inequality were more likely to have experienced lifetime and current domestic violence. Behaviors intended to control women's bodies, autonomy, and contact with others are also strongly correlated with an increased experience of intimate partner violence. Women with disabilities report a higher rate of all forms of intimate partner violence than women without disabilities. A recent review confirmed a strong link between disability and increased risk of violence. A study conducted in the European Union revealed that women with disabilities faced higher risks of experiencing violence, and that the risk was even higher for women with disabilities of a low income. Climate, health, and humanitarian crises fuel violence against women and girls. Interlocking crises include economic crises, conflicts, and climate change are intensifying gender-based violence, with marginalized women facing disproportionate and multiple forms of intersecting discrimination. Climate change and environmental degradation increase the risk of violence against women and girls due to displacement, resource scarcity, and food insecurity, and disruption to services for survivors. It is estimated that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women. After Hurricane Katrina in 2005, the rate of rape among displaced women rose 6 times the baseline rate in Mississippi for that year. Following the Canterbury earthquake in New Zealand, police reported a 53% rise in domestic violence. In Ethiopia, there was an increase in girls sold into early marriage in exchange for livestock to help families cope with the impacts of prolonged droughts. Nepal witnessed an increase in trafficking from an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 annually in 1990 to 12,000 to 20,000 per year after the 2015 earthquake. Humanitarian contexts have a severe impact on the safety of women, with 70% of women experience gender-based violence in humanitarian contexts compared to 35% worldwide. Child marriage rates are 4 percentage points higher in conflict-affected areas. In Afghanistan, by July 2024, 64% of women reported feeling not at all safe leaving home by themselves, compared to 2% of men. 8% of the surveyed women claimed that they knew at least one woman or girl who had attempted suicide in the last 3 years. In Haiti, 8% of women in camps said that they had resorted to sex work, prostitution, to meet their needs at least once, and an additional 20.6% reported knowing at least one person who had done so. Displacement and gender-based violence forcibly displaced women in Colombia and Liberia were 40% and 55% at greater risk, respectively, of experiencing intimate partner violence in the past year compared to non-displaced women. Women and girls remain the biggest share of detected victims worldwide of human trafficking and exploitation, accounting for 61% of the total in 2022, and most of them continue to be trafficked for sexual exploitation, a pattern that has carried on for many years now. Violence against girls. Slow decline in global rate of child marriage. 1 in 5 women ages 20 to 24 was first married in a union before age 18, 19%. Reflecting a moderate decrease since 2014, 22%. However, to end child marriage by 2030, progress needs to accelerate 20 times the current rate. If no progress is made, 9 million girls will marry in childhood in the year 2030, with girls from the poorest and most marginalized communities disproportionately affected. School-related gender-based violence. Globally, 1 in 3 students age 11 to 15 have been bullied by their peers at school at least once or in the past month, with girls and boys equally likely to experience bullying. While boys are more likely to experience physical bullying than girls. Girls are more likely to experience psychological bullying, and they report being made fun of because of how their face or body looks more frequently than boys. And the list goes on and on and on and on. But there's more about this. You can go to unwomen.org, but I read this not to scare us or not to depress us or not to freak us out, but I read this to say, if this is a report generated in November of 2025 about what's going on globally, and these facts and stats have been studied for a long time, why then are we surprised when we see this stuff come to the surface? And what do we think throwing one man or one perpetrator under the bus is really going to do to solve this global, I was going to say pandemic, but it's probably a little too soon to say that. This is the water that we are submerged in. It's the air that we're breathing. And it is in the lyrics, in songs, it's in movies and music videos, it's in our language, in metaphors. It's everywhere we look. And I think that part of why something like what Sean Diddy Combs was able to do over so many years, or R. Kelly was able to do, or Epstein or Weinstein were able to do over so many years was possible because there's so many beliefs that we hold that cause us to oftentimes blame survivors, blame the people who are being targeted and victimized, blame women and girls. There's so many things culturally that we've been taught to question, to debate it, to excuse it, instead of to say, you know what, something is really wrong with our culture. Something is wrong systemically. We are hurt. Our people are hurt. You know, what happened to these guys when they were boys? Why was there nowhere for them to turn and talk about their struggles so that they could get their healing and not grow up and act out that way? Again, not excusing it, but I'm saying that we have a big feat to take on. And I think that these are like the taboo struggles that oftentimes we as women and girls are told that these are our personal problems. These are not to be spoken about. These are taboo. These are our personal failings. It's because we have a low self-esteem, or we're insecure, or we weren't strong enough, or we're not a bad enough bitch, or we not a boss bitch, or whatever the case may be. And the onus for the emotional labor and the psychological labor, the mental labor, the financial, economic labor gets put on us to get our shit together so we're never in that type of position. And I think that it's a societal issue. And I also think that it needs to continue to be at the center of our movements for liberation, because these kinds of things that are happening in the music industry are happening in movement spaces, are happening in creative spaces, are happening all across spaces, and they're happening all across these different spaces because they exist in all corners of our culture. So I'm just wanting us to start thinking about, what have we survived? What happened to us? What do we know about our family and what our family survived? Not just within our family systems, but as groups of people. You know, I often think about what happened to Black people in my lineage, and in the lineages of the people who harmed me when I was a little girl, and even when I was coming up. And not just those that harmed me by perpetrating harm, but also those who harmed by neglecting me, by turning a blind eye, by denying or gaslighting, right? What happened to them? Because I think if we can stop being like, oh, they're survivors but we're not. If we could really be like, whoa, we have all been surviving this systemic oppression for thousands of years, for generations, for hundreds of years, and what have we survived? And maybe we all actually need to take on the responsibility that we put onto survivors to go get therapy and go get their head together and go heal. We all need to heal, because when we heal, that's when we regain our awareness and our ability to stand up for ourselves and others, and for us to understand our interconnectedness, and also for us to be able to, in a lot of these cases, for folks to not act out or continue the chain of oppression. And last but not least, I feel like this is really important because our creativity and our art, hip hop is one of the most powerful tools for liberation, for community building, for healing, for communication and sending a message out, right? That's why the Trump administration is trying to get all these rappers down with the gang to promote their agenda, because they understand the power of artists and the power of hip hop. And so we need to get used to believing survivors, wanting to know their stories, understanding that women's stories are not these taboo things that need to be kept to themselves. Just like the brothers get to rap about what they've seen and what they've gone through and what they've experienced and what it was like growing up, the sisters get to do that too. And this is part of the speaking truth to power that needs to happen in order for all of us to get to be full human beings with our full experience in the cipher, in the space. So until next week, I want you to think about, what have I survived? How have I survived it? What allowed me to survive? Who were the allies that I had? What did my people survive? Like as a group, over centuries, over thousands of years, over decades and generations, what did my particular family survive? What got passed down to me? And how does that impact how I see the world? And even I want to invite you, like, how you relate to creativity, whether you express it or what it is that you absorb. So anyway, y'all know hip hop is the conversation. So what the fuck is you saying? What are you saying? What's the call? What's the response? What values are being communicated? And are your values and actions in alignment? And if not, how we get them things together? I love y'all. For real, for real.